Hello and welcome to another episode of podcast Access Granted, where we bring the modern trends of cybersecurity, specifically in identity and access space. We bring the case studies, lessons learned, modern trends that customers are dealing with, and we want to share that through this podcast so all of us can learn from each other. So today, I'm very excited to have our guest, Harry Wan, who is head of product security at Britive. Welcome, Harry, to the episode here.
Good to be here.
So, Harry, tell us about your background on what have you been working on. And I know you are a pretty innovative guy, but innovation and cybersecurity must go hand in hand, and specifically with identity becoming the new parameter of cybersecurity with the move to the cloud. What are your some of the general strategy and vision, especially when running the infrastructure security for an innovative startup where the capital is tight and you cannot probably buy all these expensive tools out there, but also you cannot compromise security, right? Because it can be a make or break for the future of your startup because intellectual theft is extremely risky, and more than that, when you are a startup, you're looking to gain customer trust. So, what normally is your general strategy and vision, specifically around identity and access, that you would recommend to our audience?
Sure. So I think one of the large trends that's been happening in the engineering world has been this move to the cloud. And what that really means for cloud native engineering teams is to move to the use of microservices, services that are hosted in the cloud. So, for example, if we think of a microservice like Lambda, in terms of what a Lambda is, in terms of what it doesn't really do anything different. It's a function that does something that the engineers need. But what's innovative in the cloud is that is billed differently, that you pay for Lambdas differently than you would pay for like an EC2 instance, for example. And there's a set of fine-grained permissions associated with that Lambda. This is the real big difference between a cloud native environment and the older monoliths that were done on-prem. So the idea is, how do we identify the critical data that we're serving, and how do we make sure that that critical data and the identities associated with this critical data is well protected? I think that is one of the biggest challenges of cloud native environments in securing them.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and I think that's one of the things that cybersecurity and IEM teams and DevOps teams are realizing that as they move from data center world to the cloud world and even the multi-cloud hybrid world, the rules of the game have changed, right? So you
Yeah.
cannot continue to use the processes and tooling that you were using in data center world. And I think
Yeah.
there is this trend, there is this awareness, there is this maturity that's coming within the security teams and IEM team and DevOps team. Everybody's trying to learn what are we dealing with. And as you mentioned, Lambda is a great example. You have S3 buckets, you have Snowflake databases,
Yeah.
all have critical data, both internal and customer. It might even have your source code, like things like GitHub might have your
Yeah.
source code. And as we saw in recent breaches, right? I don't want to mention names. ChatGPT can tell the audience, but
Yeah.
simple thing as leaving a security token, AWS token in a GitHub public repo can expose the entire company to a ransomware, to a lateral movement, intellectual theft,
Yeah.
data privacy concerns. So, what are some of the strategies that you have taken? And as you mentioned, that security should be a part of your DNA from day one.
Yeah.
What are some of the strategies that you have taken and your team have taken from a security perspective in this new modern hybrid cloud world?
I think the thing that you just mentioned is very important, that there are a lot of security tokens out there. And the first thing to understand is, first is to understand your data, right? Every good security practitioner has a data classification, and they understand where your critical data is, your confidential data. But the second thing is to understand which identities have access to that confidential data, which identities, which service tokens have access to that data, and to find a way to, first of all, my strategy is to reduce the number of static tokens that we have have to use. The less is better. The Not having to rotate static tokens, using ephemeral token, ephemeral access, that really is a key strategy in reducing the attack surface area.
That's great. So, and I think comparing this to the old world, right,
Yeah.
where people were used to these user group passwords, rotating them every 30 days, vaulting the passwords was seen as a privileged access approach where okay, you are a user, I will, when you want access just in time, I will give you, and I add you to a group which have service accounts statically provisioned, over provisioned. That was in a way old way, a legacy way of doing privileged access management. So you are saying that you don't even have to have that, and I think maybe you can just clarify a little bit more in terms
Sure.
of what actually just in time means in the modern world and how cloud has made it easier for customers and vendors to adopt to a newer approach.
So I think the idea of ephemeral privilege access is actually a very old concept. The other day, I was just reading the history of sudo. Sudo is a super user do on a Linux system. And this actually is more than 30 years old. This concept of not running permanently privileged on your Linux machine and requesting the higher level privileges um, is a very old concept. And it's a very valid concept. This allows you to, if you had a piece of malware on your Linux box, it would have to get super user privileges in order to do something bad, if you would. So this concept exists in the cloud today. Um, However, what the difference is that the cloud is all API driven. So what you want to do is make use of whatever cloud functions are things that are available in the cloud to enable you to just use your privileges for time limit on a time limited basis.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, and one of the things that I was on a call yesterday with a customer,
Mm-hmm.
and we mentioned that with what cloud provides, right? The cloud innovation, especially with AWS, this whole IAM user and assumed role
Yep.
innovation that they brought up, which is what I think Britive is also following and abstracting it across all the major cloud providers. The beauty of this is you don't really even need to have secondary, tertiary service accounts. You can actually take your own primary user, primary main account, and elevate them on the fly, create the user on the fly, provide them privileges, and take them away when you don't need them. So, if from a operationally and administrative perspective, it becomes easier. So, maybe you can say something on how you're managing this whole environment with a smaller team, do more with less. What are some of the things that you want to highlight here?
So I think your strategy that you mentioned is a completely valid strategy. Yeah, I can definitely say that let's have two accounts. We have Harry.Wan at Brightive.com, not non-privileged account. Then we have Harry-admin. In fact, one of my friends, when I talked to him about what I did at Brightive, and I asked him, how do you solve this problem for some of your clients? He goes, we just have dash admin accounts. These dash admin accounts don't have mail enabled, so they can't be phished. And so what we do is we log out of the main account, we log into this admin account, we do our stuff that we need to do, and then we log back into our main account. That's a completely valid strategy. Um, However, with the new cloud infrastructure, you don't need to do that anymore. In fact, we've seen customers when we say, hey, you don't need to have a dash admin account. You don't need to pay for a second account. You could have um, modern tools like Brightive just give you the authorization to do the administrative tasks that you need to do and automatically take them away. It gives you the same risk as a dash admin account without needing a second credential, without needing to log out of your main account, but you have the same level of protection as a dash admin account.
That's beautiful. I think it is that eureka moment that a lot of customers they realize that how easy it can make their life and how easy it can make dealing with audits. Because if you don't even have anything existing, then what do you have to do to prove that it is not being in a risky environment? So that basically is a key. And I think a lot of time the legacy world talk about session recording, right?
Yeah,
And I think the whole concept of session recording is about having those static overprivileged service accounts or accounts that are there that you are using then secondary third accounts to tie to. So maybe one of the things that I also realized that with this new approach, you can actually make those audit easier and get that stringent requirements of having video captures all day long that nobody probably even looks at it in the entire year, and
yeah,
maybe eating up your storage space, adding to your cloud bill as well. So anything about in terms of how it has made audit easier, or
yeah.
maybe logs can actually be sent to your SIEM to satisfy that requirement because now you don't really have any accounts that exist.
Yeah, I think the idea that you have an on-prem space that is privileged with an on-prem privileged account that you want to record all the administrative tasks that you're doing, I think that's a really old kind of way of thinking about it, right? I think the newer world is, can we consolidate our privileges and our privilege access? And like you say, can we send all that activity to a scene? Um, and allow the scene to record the activities that are done there. I think that is the newer way to do it because there isn't a choke point anymore. The idea of, oh, we're going to use a proxy and we're only going to log into the AWS console through a proxy. I think that is doable, but that really kind of defeats the whole purpose of the cloud.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, I think that's where the modern approach that I see a lot of customers are taking is to streamline and understand what innovation can be brought to this identity and access space. And these are some of the things that they're looking at. Now, coming to compliance, right? I know that
Yep.
being head of security, compliance is one thing that you have to look at. And it seems as compliance is a hurdle, right? I mean, everybody sees a hurdle, especially for a fast-moving startup. But it's not really about stifling the innovation, but it's about how can you provide a secure, thriving environment for your innovation, and how can you be trusted in front of your customers from day one, right? So, from a compliance perspective, what are some of the challenges that you see, that how do you balance, speed of innovation with the compliance, and any common misconceptions that you have come across in terms of the compliance and audit requirements?
So Britive is a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant company. And I think the key thing to understand is which part of compliance is prescriptive. You must do X, Y, and Z. And which ones are more conceptual, meaning you have various ways to be compliant. So for Britive's compliance, SOC 2 Type 2 wants you to make sure that you manage your users well, that you have good onboarding and good offboarding. It also talks about how your software development lifecycle needs to be so that you have separation of duties. So what we do is we actually use Britive to do our privileged access management. We review the groups and the tags in Britive, and I only have to review all my privileged access in one place. That's what I do.
That's great. That's great. Now, in terms of integration and with an ecosystem, and obviously from an identity and access perspective, considering that it has become the important attribute of modern cybersecurity. In fact, it could you can think of identity as a new firewall, right? New zero trust authorization firewall. Um, what type of
Just before you dive to, I think the one of the key things to understand is that with the fine grained privileges that we have, identity and the concepts around identity are a major attack vector right now for cyber criminals. It used to be that we would defend against vulnerabilities in your software, and that would be the major attack, right? But now credentials are now the major source of attack. You'll see that credentials are being sold on the dark web, and this is a really, really important kind of area to balance. I think that for me, managing my software development lifecycle vulnerabilities is as important. Managing identity is as important as managing those vulnerabilities in the company.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a recent cyber breach attack with a major casino brand, right? Where cyber criminals were able to do social engineering, got the
Yep. Yep.
um, support account which has
Yep.
over provision static
Yep.
privileges, and they're able to then elevate their permissions, did data exfiltration, laterally move,
Yep.
were able to get access to all the bad things that they could do. So I think
Yep.
even a single credential breach
Yep.
can expose your entire enterprise in a very very bad way, right? So
Yep.
forget about
Absolutely.
the risk and the financial penalty, but reputation, intellectual theft is a major key risk that you want to avoid at all cost. Now, in
Yep.
terms of the ecosystem, right? So
Yep.
let's say you are running a startup, you are somebody similar to you in your role.
Yep.
From a overall identity and access perspective, what do you consider, what are the things that I need to have? Obviously, cloud privilege access management is one, but in general you need to have two or three different categories and product and vendors from each category to make up that stack. So what would you recommend to someone who is in a similar position and say, okay, I want to make sure my security stack is tight and I want to secure my users, whether human or non-human? What
Yep.
would be your recommendation?
Well, I think the first kind of defense is single sign-on, right? I think that we should all, as much as possible, use single sign-on. Single sign-on allows us to have a single place to provision and deprovision users. And the vendors that ask us to pay extra for single sign-on, I think that's actually not a very good thing. So I think that's the first thing. I think that really takes care of authentication, right? But the second stack then is how do we make sure that we can do the right authorizations? Every user will have some permanent authorizations, right? I can always read my email and stuff like that. But how do we now protect against the more privileged authorizations, and how do we make those temporal, right? And then the third thing is how do we periodically review those accesses? How do we periodically review who has access to what, who has authorizations to what? I think that's the third part of the stack, if you would.
Yeah. So you would put them into a category of, let's say, IDP slash SSO for your single
Yep.
sign-on, and a
Yep.
CPAM, which is like a Britive
Yep.
of the world. And then in terms of the reviews, is it
Yep.
like a IGA? Would you consider this an IGA category, or would you put them into a different category?
I would consider that IGA, right? Identity governance, right? We, doing periodic reviews. I think many companies use spreadsheets for this, right? We use a Microsoft identity governance product for our company.
Got it. Got it. So IDP slash SSO MFA type of a
Yeah, yeah,
category, then you have a CPAM category, and then you have a IGA category. That is the
yeah, yeah.
minimum stack that you need for identity and access that you would recommend. All right.
Yes.
Now, in terms of future, I think this podcast is about in general identity and access and sharing learnings and knowledge. What do you see? What are the trends in the identity and access management that really excites you, and especially if you look at today, right? The world is talking about AI, right, and
Yeah.
Gen AI, and for a real reason, because I personally have seen 30%, 40% productivity right away as you start to use AI stacks that you have,
Yeah.
and world is going towards that. Obviously, currently the focus is Gen AI and computer vision and natural language processing, but overall it will go into other areas as well as we mature. But what are some of the trends that you're seeing that excites you from an identity and access perspective?
I think the biggest thing I think AI will kind of bring to us in the identity space is identity anomaly detection. We always talk about these. Oh, can I detect that Nauman, normally logs in from this IP, and then he logged in from a different IP? In theory, that's true, but the amount of false positives I get from that is just horrendous to a point where it's not useful, right? Can we get to the point where, because we've consolidated privilege in a CPAM tool, can we then feed that to an AI tool that gives me real anomaly detection? Really, it says, we have a regular admin. He maybe has gone through some family issues. Now he's a different person and he's abusing his admin privileges. Can we have a real detection on that at scale? I think being able to do that, if AI can be trained to do that, I think that would be a really, really positive thing for the IAM world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think I can totally see that, and I think if you even look at the most of the modern products around CPAM, let's say Britive is one of them, but
Yep.
there may be others, but the amount of intelligence that they already have in terms
Yep.
of checking for the metadata around the user,
Yeah.
right? What countries you're logging from, are you in
Yep.
normal working hours, what time, what IP addresses, all of that, the foundation is already there, right?
Yep.
Is the matter of adding your new Gen AI tool set, new capabilities to make it even easier for customers, right?
Yep.
To protect as well as
Yeah.
to make it operationally simple, right? So I love that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that trend from vendors and from Britive as well,
Yep.
which hopefully will come soon. Now, in terms of practical advice, right? I always ask this question. Obviously you have been in Britive here. Maybe you have done similar roles. Maybe you can mention something about how things were in the previous things that you have done. But what would be your some practical advice that you will give to startups to implement the security approaches, security strategies without stopping or putting a roadblock in the speed of innovation, right? And most important thing is to balance this with user convenience. Because at the end of the day, your users needs to feel like they're not doing additional work to adopt and integrate the security as part of their day to day. It could be a CI/CD pipeline. It could be a Terraform, Python environment they're working with, and they don't want to go and log into five different places, right? So what are some of the practical advice in general that you would give, and then how do you balance this with usability and user convenience?
Yeah, I think first thing is identify kind of where you are in your journey, right? If you're part of a large company with a large monolith, you're constrained by kind of the current environment. But many of the new, if you're in a new startup, you're likely going to be cloud native. And I think the important thing is to look for cloud native tools and then work with engineering to implement those tools so that we can balance security with user convenience, right? The idea of using an older on-prem tool and extending that to be in a cloud native environment really is a not a good way to go, right? You're looking for cloud native kind of CPAM tools. You're seeing the cloud vendors have their own kind of CPAM type tools now, which kind of really tells you that this is a needed category, right? But if you're multi-cloud, looking for an independent CPAM vendor would be a very positive thing to do.
That's great. That's great. And I think that's a great advice. And in a world where data is the gold, right? And,
Yeah.
robbers they used to rob banks because the money
Yeah.
is there. Now cyber criminals are going after the cloud world because that's the way the data is, and they can do bad things and really interfere with the innovation that we all want to have, right? We all, no matter what vendor it is, people are innovating and they're innovating very fast, and we want to make sure we provide them a secure, thriving environment, bring the trust to the customers. And as I've seen that startups who build security from day one are the ones that last the long, right? So in
Yep.
terms of security, so Harry, thanks a lot for your time here and your advice. If people wants to reach out to you or they want some advice from you, where can they reach out? How can they talk to you?
Yeah, I'm at harry.wan at brightive.com. Welcome questions.
And I love, by the way, I love your capture the flag event that you do, which is all about educating the professionals in the cloud around identity and access in a very, I would say, gamify way. So maybe just before we leave, just a few words about CTF and how people can register and learn about the attacker mindset and how can you protect against it.
Yep, yep. So I actually came into being a security professional through Capture the Flag events and participating in them. So Brightive actually has a Capture the Flag event that's really focused about identity, how identity is abused, and how you can use tools to protect against that abuse. So look for a Brightive Capture the Flag and hope you join us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harry. Really appreciate it. Maybe we'll get together on another episode talking about some other topics. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you.